spinning back to the open side. Bete, lovely ball here for Samu, who's quick. Pete Samu looking for Bete, back to Samu. Oh, that is wonderful. That is wild. That is amazing from the Wallabies.
Welcome to Pick and Drive Rugby. We're the People's Podcast, providing a platform for rugby lovers to come together and support the game that's played in heaven. Match reviews, player interviews, and quality rugby chat that is consistent and positive. We do it all for you, our dear listeners. I'm your host, Ando. With me is Mitch.
Howdy.
And Joe.
Hello there.
Guys, it is an absolute pleasure to have both of you here. Joe, your background is the... how would you best describe the background to your video right now?
It's one of the most infamous and hilarious moments in Brumbies history, and it's when Brumby Jack was feeling rather unwell one night and had to go the old up and under out on the field.
All right. Well, for those of you that don't know what it's about, I won't get any more details because it might tie into something we're doing a little bit later, mate. But can I highly recommend that people search up on YouTube Brumby Jack Vomit, and you'll see a great episode on the old Fox Sports rugby show with Rod Kafer and Sean Maloney doing an absolutely brilliant straight-faced interview about this whole thing. It's great. So anyway, tonight we are here to provide you with the final installation of the pre-season previews, or the Super Rugby Pacific previews, I should say. We're going to go through a couple of quick trial results from the weekend, jump into some Brumbies trivia, and then the reason why we have Joe here is because he's one of those die-hard Brumbies supporters. Joe, how long have you been a Brumbies fan?
Ever since I've been following rugby, I guess. So, I
Brilliant.
don't know, 2000.
All right. So if you don't absolutely paste Mitch in the trivia that's coming up, you're going to be basically not being able to show your head at the dock in Canberra anymore.
That's right. I live in the north, so I'll be fine.
I just want to point out for all those that are playing along at home who aren't tuning into YouTube, I'm sitting here in my beautiful Waratahs jersey in preview for the victory that's coming Friday night against the men from the ACT. So repping the team. See that Joe's also wearing a nice sky blue coloured top as well. So I'm glad we're all
not sky blue.
It's close enough.
And I'm wearing black, mourning for the Brumbies and what's going to be happening to them this coming Friday. So it's going to be great fun. But there are a couple of things that I'm going to before we actually get into the meat and veg for tonight or this episode. So first things first, we have a Super Rugby tipping competition that you need to join. Really, really simple. You have to join it if you're listening to this podcast. And we've decided to move away from Super Brew because of the pain in the ass platform that, whilst was great in some ways, had many annoyances in others. So we're going to this official Super Rugby Pacific tipping website. Once you go there, you can create a profile, all completely free, and then just search for Pick and Drive Rugby, or you enter this code.
Oh, you've got that on your mind, don't you, Ando?
I know. ZEP94K8A. So just enter that in. We'll put it on our socials as well, and join in there. We already have 53 people so far with an tipping competition. Let's see if we can get it well over 100 before the competition starts on Friday.
And just a reminder as well, if you're listening now, before the season starts, and you're thinking, do I want to get involved in the tipping comp? You most certainly do, because we have a fantastic shield where we engrave the winner's name on at the end of the season. So you probably won't get there if you join halfway through the year. You won't be able to catch up to the rest of the comp. So get in now, and you'll get yourself a nice little trophy at the end of the season, and you might even get your name on the shield as well. So all a bit of fun to play for.
Very exciting. Okay, two other quick things. Number one, join us on our Discord server. So Discord is an awesome platform for building a community of like-minded fans. So get involved, download Discord, set up an account, all completely free, and then search. Again, we have the join links on our social media platforms, so you can go there. And then lastly, for those of you who do want to support the pod, please consider going to coffee.com/pick and drive rugby and supporting us with a one-off or monthly subscription. We really appreciate it. We've bought a few new gadgets that are going to be helping with our live podcast that we're going to be doing at the stadiums after each game that we attend. So there's a lot of stuff that we've been investing based upon the support that you provided. So thank you. That's it from me. Fellas, let's get into things and chat some rugby. Let's take it away.
Let's go. All right, time to talk some trial form now. And so we had 3 trials that happened over the weekend, or in the last week, we should say. The first one was a home trial for, I think this one was technically the Indrua had the home trial, but it was played up in Brisbane. So it was, I think, home of West's Bulldogs in Brisbane. It was played on, memory serves me, Tuesday or Thursday night last week. Was Thursday on Stan Sport. It's Thursday night. So it was on Stan Sport. So if you haven't had a chance to catch it, you do get amongst it because they do have it up there to watch. It was a 48-38 win to the Indrua in that game. Gentlemen, did we get a chance to see that? What were our sort of overall thoughts from that game?
Yeah, I did. So it was really interesting. There were some entertaining moments, obviously, from both teams. When you have a score that's that high, there's going to be some great entertaining attacking play where both teams are willing to throw it around. The couple of takeaways that I had was the Drua are going to be a real handful this season. They are fitter, faster, and stronger than they were last year after a full pre-season. So that was really, like, we'd spoken about it previously with Mick Byrne, the coach, on our interview with him, but to see that in action was something else entirely. So that's pretty concerning as a Aussie rugby fan, that they might take some games off our respective teams. But the other part was the Force had some good moments, but man, their discipline was shocking. It was so bad. So many ruck infringements and offside calls against them. Maybe they're settling into a new defensive pattern or something like that, but it was really poor discipline. And unfortunately, Michael Wells had to do yet another post-match interview as the captain of a team that's just been beaten by somebody they should have won against. So that was pretty hard to watch again, thinking back to last year. But Joey, did you have a chance to catch this match, mate?
Unfortunately not. No, I did not. I haven't seen it. I've seen, I think, one highlight, and it was a pick and go try from the Indrua. So that's it.
Yeah. Mitch, do you want me to go through a couple of other points then quickly?
Yeah, I was just going to say I've caught bits and pieces of this game. I was sort of tuning in and out throughout the evening whilst doing other things. And like, I guess for Force fans, it was a bit of a comfort to know that they never really like gave up, which was good to see. Like there was a few points in the game where the score was at least 2 scores ahead, and they never really like looked like they sort of stopped trying or sort of went into themselves or didn't stop, having a crack. So that was good to see. And I think they ended up getting within 7 points. It's in the second half, and then the Indrua scored another try, and they ended up getting within 10. But from what I saw I think I tuned in for the first 10-15 minutes, and by that point the Drua were quite convincingly up, and they had scored some pretty soft tries. And so I was sort of thinking geez, this is going to be a mammoth score when I tune in later on. But when I tuned in later in the second half, the Force were still sort of within scoring and touching distance. So although this wasn't both full teams going at it, I think there will be some good signs that come out of it in terms of the fact that they were still able to hold on and hold within distance of the Indrua, but still not great overall for the Force, I guess.
No, not really. And I mean, knowing a few of the Western Force players better, for me, I know them better than the Drua players, unfortunately, in a way. I'd love to know more Drua players to a greater degree. But for the Force, Sam Spinks, who's just come across from England, really stood out at 13. He was quite impressive, particularly within his attacking efforts. His defensive organisation was sound as well, but particularly it was his strength in the carry was really good to see. So hopefully that will be a really smooth transition there into 13, because it's a position that with Godwin and Kahui not at the club anymore, they don't have a ready-made 13. Hamish Stewart played pretty well at 10. Kind of nothing amazing to write home about, but he seemed to marshal the team relatively well and stuck most of his tackles. And then who else was I going to say? Ian Pryor. Going to say he outplayed Fines Leliawasa, without a doubt. Anybody that watches the game in full, you see the the accuracy of passing, the crispness of his delivery. It was just his control of the team around the park. As much as Leliawasa is an excitement machine, and he showed at various points over the last 2 years his capacity to do great runs and great snipes in an attacking sense, Pryor, it wouldn't surprise me if Pryor is the starting scrum half for the first half of the season, and it finds a little while to kind of boot him out of that spot. But yeah, entertaining game to watch, but fair few concerns if you're a Force fan or an Australian rugby fan going up against a Drua.
Yep. I will say that before we move on, the last thing was it was great to see like Super Rugby being played at a suburban ground again. Like it really had like a different feel to it than you sort of get tuning into the Reds playing at Suncorp or the Waratahs playing at the New Allianz. Like there was crowds sort of standing a meter, if not closer, on from the sidelines and sort of getting involved and having real close impact to the players. So that was a little bit different. It was nice to see as well. We'll move across now into the Waratahs. So the Waratahs played a trial game against two of the Shoot Shield teams on the weekend. They played the first half, I believe, against West Harbour, and then the second half against Parramatta or Western Sydney Two Blues. Ando, you were out there for the first half at least. What were your sort of thoughts around the performance of the Waratahs in that trial?
Look, it's really hard to take anything meaningful away in terms of like Super Rugby predictions, because the team that took the field for the Waratahs had maybe two players that might feature in the match day 23. So it was Hugh Sinclair and Nemani Ndolo. So out of those two, Nemani Ndolo barely got the ball at all. He was on the left wing and it just never went out to him, except for one time where he walked over for a try and he actually put it down this time instead of dropping it. But Hugh Sinclair was a cut above everybody else. The thing that I found was the Waratahs forward pack really struggled, particularly in the first kind of 20 minutes against West Harbour and also with the Two Blues. The forwards were the areas where we were getting kind of pretty challenged, but the backs were quite impressive. So Teddy Wilson at 9 was distributing well to O'Donnell at 10. And then, there was just some really, really good play. Harry Wilson at, I think he was playing 11, was excellent in a way that he was just injecting himself with pace into the back line. So, the backs were pretty impressive, but unfortunately, the forwards did struggle a little bit more than what I thought was going to happen. They turned it around, but it didn't go their way, particularly against the Two Blues, so they went down to 12-7.
Yeah, and I think look, we've got to take a grain of salt with this. Like, when you think about it from a sort of logistics point of view, like you, as a fan, you expect the Waratahs to be playing the Western Sydney Two Blues, but really it was the development squad and some of the wider training members who may not necessarily be on full-time contracts with the Waratahs who were kind of getting a crack. So you kind of take the results with a grain of salt, and you don't worry too much around how it's going to impact the team going into round one this coming weekend. But at least it is good to see that they are continuing that pathway through with the Shoot Shield. And it was something that DC brought in last year where they played a trial against 3 teams. So both teams that were represented this weekend, but they also had the Hunter Newcastle team, Hunter Wildfires as well. So it was good to see they've continued that tradition. But yeah. And actually, one question I do have for you, was it the new Concord Oval? What were your thoughts on the facilities?
Look, the facilities were pretty great. You could buy a beer for $6 and it was a decent beer as well. So there's something to be said for that. The food was good as well. The stand was mostly undercover, but it was so hot. It was 35 degrees on a day. And so everybody was chasing the sun as it was moving across the seats and stuff. But the facilities themselves, really good. Clean, new, and everything was affordable as opposed to going to any other sporting stadium throughout the country. So that's positive.
Yeah, hopefully we can see the Shoot Shield final move back there after a few years of it being at Parramatta for varying success. So hopefully that's a good thing for the Shoot Shield moving forward. Now, the last trial we had over the weekend as well was for the Waratahs women. Now, they were over in New Zealand playing some trial games against the Awapiki teams. I think from memory, they only played 2 games against the Chiefs women and the Blues women. We've got the results here from the Chiefs game. It was 12-0. That seems awfully
So that was
similar
actually
to
the Blues game.
as well.
So that was the Blues game,
say
and the Chiefs game was 26-0 against the Waratahs. Now, it wasn't the Waratahs' strongest team for for either match in terms of giving some of the wider squad a bit of opportunities, and a lot of the Wallaroos players, or a few of the Wallaroos players didn't feature. But yeah, still quite convincing losses, particularly against the Chiefs. But either way, it's great for the women to actually have like a 5-day tour of New Zealand and get those games in ahead of time.
And it's just great to see that crossover. It's something that we've been sort of hoping to see a little bit more between Super W and Super Rugby Our Piggy. So hopefully we can see that continue in future and get a fully trans-Tasman competition up and running, which would be awesome.
Yep,
Anything
definitely.
else you guys wanted to say around the trial form, or shall we move into our preview this week? Cool, let's go.
Let's go. All right, we're moving now into the trivia part of the night, and I'm getting some back chat here from the boys who are asking heaps of questions. So what is going to be happening? Let me paint you the picture of what this experience is going to be. I have 8 questions prepared for you. I'm going to go through and ask them. Some of them will be multi-part, as in like, if you get 3 of the kind of sub-questions within it, you get the 3 points. If you get one of them, 1 point, so on and so forth. And you write down all the questions, all your answers as we go, and then we'll go through the answers at the end and you tally your own points. Okay? So no answers straight
can I
away.
go to the
Like, don't
bathroom?
say them out loud. No, shut up. You should have gone before we started.
Oh,
all right. So seriously, the amount of whinging these two had when I was like, oh, you'll need pen and paper. They're like, what? What is this? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, listening along, I want you to be showing us how much you know about the Brumbies. Please make sure that you jump onto our socials and tell us how many points that you received within this quiz, within this trivia, and particularly mock these two fellas for the results that they get. So let's see how we go. Okay, cool. So question number 1. What percentage, and this is a historical question over time, what percentage of Brumbies players have become Wallabies? The closest wins. Okay, so out of you two, the closest wins. So don't say what you're thinking, write an answer down. Okay, what percentage of all Brumbies players have become Wallabies? The closest answer wins.
Okay.
I will preface that for everybody else. I will preface that for everybody else by saying this is what the Brumbies website says. So let's hope that they're telling the truth. Now, don't look it up on your computers whilst we're doing this. Now, question number 2. How many Super Rugby finals have the Brumbies participated in?
Question. Does that the Super AU count? Like all of them? They all count?
That's a fantastic question. Let me check on that one for you whilst we're doing this. So I had this up before. Okay, we are... Oh, no, I've got it here. Okay, cool. It does not include Super AU.
Oh, okay.
It does not include Super Rugby AU.
Okay, cool.
Thanks. That's a good question. I had thought of that beforehand, but then forgot when you asked me. So that's helpful. Okay, so that was question number 2. How many Super Rugby finals have the Brumbies played in, not including Super Rugby AU? Question number 3. Brumbies legend George Gregan played 139 games for the Wallabies. This is a 3-point question. In what year did he debut for the Wallabies? Where did he debut? And against whom did he debut? Now, I'm going to give you some hints. What does George Gregan have to do with the Brumbies? Okay, that's a silly question. Thank you, Mitchell. Hints. I was 7.
Can he fail just because of that, please?
Yeah, I think he can. He's okay. Mitch, you lose a point. I'm writing that down. Just lost Mitch equals -1. Hints. I was 7 when he debuted for the Wallabies. So if you know how old I am, that might help.
It's not helping me.
It's in Australia. The match that he played in was in Australia, and it was against a touring European team. So that narrows it down a bit for you. Okay? So, I was 7. It's in Australia against a touring European team. In what year did George Gregan debut for the Wallabies? Where was his debut, and against whom was his debut? All right, I'll give you 5 seconds and I'll move on. Next up, when Super 12 kicked off in 1996, who was the Brumbies coach? Considering there haven't been that many Brumbies coaches since then, I would hope this is one we can get.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Next.
All right, cool. In a second year of the Super 12 competition in 1997, the Brumbies reached the Super 12 final. Who did they lose that Super 12 final to? Question number 6. Mm-hmm. What is the name of the trophy or cup, whatever you want to call it, played for between the Waratahs and the Brumbies in honor of this coming Friday night's match? So what is the name of the trophy or cup played for between the Waratahs and the Brumbies? All right. Question 7. You need to write down the name of this player. It's a who am I, but nobody can jump in first. So you just need to write down the name of the player. Okay?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I debuted for the Brumbies in 2012 and was selected as Brumbies captain in that same year. I earned my Wallabies debut in 2013 against the British and Irish Lions, replacing James Horwill as Wallabies captain later that year. Before joining the Brumbies, I'd also played at the Waratahs and the Reds, and I left Australian rugby at the end of 2014 to sign for Montpellier in France. That is all you're getting. If you don't know it by that, you're disowned. I love how much thinking there is going on about these. This is good. The pressure. Okay. Are we good to move on? Final question?
Yep. Final question. Let's do it.
Go for it.
Okay. Final question. Joe, I love that you chose that as your background. Okay. So this is the final question. The brother of which Super Rugby player was hungover on game day or drunk on game day, put on the Brumbies mascot costume, Brumby Jack, and puked everywhere on the side of the field, forever damaging the minds of young Brumbies fans? The brother of which Super Rugby player was Brumby Jack?
Cool.
All right, team.
Done.
That is 8 questions with 10 points in total. So the most points that Joey can get is 10. The most points that Mitch can get is 9. And we are going to see how this goes. So now, what we'll do is, Mitch, you can answer the question number 1 first. What percentage of Brumbies players have become Wallabies' closest wins? So, Mitch, what was your answer?
I've said 65%.
Okay,
I've gone
Joey?
way too high.
I went 33, so we've literally gone the opposite ends of the pie.
33, so 17, 65 is 15 above. It is flat 50%. So congratulations, Mitch. 50%, you're the closest to it by 15, by 2%. So anybody listening, if you're closer than 15%, congratulations, you beat Mitch on that
Is
one.
that just because Mitch is bad at fractions? That he isn't. He thought 2/3 was 65%.
Okay, next up. How many Super Rugby finals have the Brumbies participated in, Joe?
I think it's 6, but it could be 5.
Oh, it's a little bit more than that. Mitch, how many did you have?
Is it?
Finals is in grand finals.
Yes. How many Super Rugby finals
I said 3.
have the Brumbies participated in? No, it is 6 plus. It is 6. 2, 4, 6. So it's 6 with
6.
2. I know, I miscounted. So it is 6, and 2 of them are wins. So I had 6 plus 2 on my sheet. It's actually 4 plus 2. So they got to the final 4 times without winning, and they won twice. So congratulations, Joe. You smashed that on the nose.
Yeah.
All right. Following up from that, because Joe, I can't let Mitch have this question. George Cregan,
I don't know.
What year did he debut?
Was it 94? I don't know.
1 point.
It was
1994.
Yeah, good.
Mitch, what did you have?
94.
What did you say?
I said 2006.
What?
A little bit later.
He won the 99 World Cup.
He did. All right, let's go. What city in Australia did he debut in? Joe?
I guess Sydney, but I've got no idea.
And Mitch?
Brisbane.
There we go. One each. Yeah. And who is he playing? Mitch, follow it up.
England.
Okay, and Joe?
I had England as well.
Italy. So 1994, Brisbane, Italy. Okay. So currently we have Mitch on 2 and Joe on 2. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yep.
Brilliant. Okay. Hey, Joe, when Super Rugby 12 kicked off in 96, who was the Brumbies coach?
Rod McQueen.
Correct. Did you have that, Mitch?
Yes, I did.
Awesome. 3-3. The Brumbies reached the Super 12 final in 1997. Who did they lose to, Mitch?
The Bulls?
Nope. Joe?
No.
The Blues.
The Blues, correct. So that means
I had the B team.
4-3. What is the name of the trophy or cup played for between the Waratahs and the Brumbies, Mitch?
I couldn't remember. I went with the Ellis Mobs Cup, but I think that's the England one, the New England one.
Yeah. It is. And Joe?
It's the Dan Vickerman Cup, isn't it?
It is the Dan Vickerman Cup, correct.
Okay,
yes, so it's 5-3. 5-3. Let's hope that Joey scuffs the next two, and that gives you an opportunity to get back into the running, Mitch. Okay. The name of this player, I won't go through it all again, but basically earned his Wallabies debut in 2013 and replaced James Horwill as captain that year. Joe?
It was Ben Mowen.
That is correct. Did you have Ben Mowen, Mitch?
I did not.
Bugger. So that does clinch the deal, 6-3, but let's still go through the last response. And Mitch, I'll give this one to you. Whose brother was Brumby Jack in that infamous episode?
Is it Clyde Rathbone?
It was. Well done. Very well done. So I think it's 7-4 is the final result, and I haven't even taken a
7-3
yet.
Because I got -1 apparently.
7-4 because you lost anyway. I don't need to rub it in. So congratulations, ladies and gentlemen, playing at home. Hopefully you enjoyed that as well. But I think without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to, I believe, Mitch, who is going to be taking us through our Brumbies preview. Mitch, over to you.
Fantastic. All right, let's dive into it. So this is our Brumbies preview for 2023. Let's start off with the 2022 season. So in 2022, the Brumbies finished in 4th place. They had 10 wins and 4 losses. If we dive through some of their key games and best performances, actually, I'll get you, Joey. What were your thoughts on their key games for 2022?
Yeah. So, funnily enough, I've sort of got their 3 key games are actually all losses. So, round 13 against the Crusaders, round 14 against the Blues, and then the semi-final against the Blues. And the reason I thought that they were the sort of key games, excluding their best performance, which is another game, was just because they actually proved, I think, that they belonged at the top of that pecking order with the other teams. Particularly against the Crusaders and the Blues. So in the second half against the Crusaders, they sort of, after a pretty loose first half where I think they tried to play probably a bit too much rugby, they sort of tightened things up and got some momentum. And I think that sort of proved to them that their style of rugby and the way that they want to play the game was good enough to compete with the top teams. And then they backed that up into the next week against the Blues, which they lost with that Bodie Barrett field goal after the siren. So they came back, really wasn't a pretty game, was just really brutal, physical game, bit of a Laurie Fisher special, lots of belting everyone at the breakdown and stuff like that. But it just sort of showed that they were belonged at the top with those 2 other teams. And then the semi-final again, that was a very full-on game. Obviously, 1 point in it, and that I think just sets the benchmark for where they should be aiming going forward.
And as a Brumbies fan, do you sit here now and think of the what could have been when you review that semi-final? Those last 2 or 3 minutes were really quite tight for and quite hard for any Australian rugby fan.
I think what probably stands out. I haven't actually gone back and watched it because I'm not a glutton for punishment. But it was probably they got off to a really good start. Ire Simone busted through off a scrum and they got the first try. But after that, they were pretty loose actually, and they let the Blues get out to a bit of a lead. So it wasn't until they tightened up in the second half that they got back into it. So I sort of look back at it and go more that it was the first half where I think they could have been better, and if they had have been better in that time or just playing their style of footy the whole way through, they probably would have won that game, or at least would have been in a not relying on a speculative 40-meter drop goal that gets charged down on full time to win it. So that's probably my memories of that game looking back on it.
And Ando, when you sort of review the whole season that was 2022 for the Brumbies, what's the best performance that jumps out for you?
Yeah, it was. Sorry, I kind of like choked and died for a moment there whilst Joey was talking. That's why I went off camera for a bit.
3 losses. What's he on?
Still got it going. 3 losses. But basically, for me, it was the performance against the Chiefs, particularly because they're away. And so it was just a really, really dominant game against a pretty highly rated New Zealand team. They were playing well at the time, and away from home against the Kiwi team is always challenging and difficult. So it was just the quality of that performance. I'm pretty sure Lolosiu was out at that point. So it was Rod Yona who was filling in at 10. Or was he available for that game?
No, he played that game. He played against all the New Zealand teams. I think he played the first few. He was out against the Crusaders.
That's the one. Okay, I remember seeing Rod Yona for a few of them. But yeah, it was just
the Blues as well. I can't remember that one, but yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So for me, it was just that moment of really, really strong performance where they're playing to expectation before they actually hit a bit of a downturn near the end of the season. So the final matches within their season were really, really disappointing. So they then followed the Chiefs game up with a loss to the Crusaders, a loss to the Blues. They lost to the Moana Pacifica and beat the Canes before getting into the finals. So they had 4 losses in a row after that Chiefs, three losses after that Chiefs game, which is 3, which is a really bad way to finish a season. So for me, that Chiefs match is kind of like the high point, because after that it kind of goes down a little bit at the end of the season from where they had been earlier on.
Yeah, and I think from memory as well, was that the second? That was the second week of the crossover, that Chiefs game, wasn't it? So they played the Highlanders in Melbourne.
That was the third.
So they play Highlanders, then Canes, and then Chiefs.
Yeah, they sort of built on this crescendo up, having had the bye, and then they just sort of went out and got the job done against the Highlanders. Then they put on a pretty good display against the Hurricanes at home. Went over to New Zealand against probably the 3rd best New Zealand team and put a clinic on. And then they, without Noah, got a bit wayward against the Crusaders until they sort of knuckled down and went it in the forwards.
Yep.
And then they had the game against the Blues,
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I just remember, from an Australian perspective, that Chiefs game was, and the Highlanders game to some degree as well, was quite refreshing for Australian rugby fans, in that we'd seen some of the other teams, like in Super Round, the Waratahs went up against the Chiefs and got absolutely pummeled. And then the Brumbies in the afternoon of, I think, the second day, came out and absolutely demolished the Highlanders and sort of gave some pride back to the Australian rugby fans. And then they were building so nicely. And it was just really unfortunate when they did lose Noah for those key games late in the end of the season. And sort of it kind of showed and summed up for them that Noah was such an integral player. And without him, they weren't quite able to unleash their backline as much.
It's funny though, I look back on it and just go, oh, those games, despite the losses, were like, no, their best will be good, like is good enough. It's just they've got to do their best for the full 80 against those good teams. That's sort of what I took away from them. So well, the Moana game was like a bad loss, but I think that was sort of, they went on a really hard sprint, and I think they were just mentally stuffed at the end of those 5 games against the Kiwi teams, and they just sort of sent over they were looking ahead to the quarterfinal basically. Yeah.
And it's been interesting to just listen to what. Yep, you go,
Mitch. You go, Mitch.
Okay,
we're too nice. No, you go.
No, you. It's been interesting to hear what some of the coaches have said in the lead up to 2023 already. That that last season, so the crossover with the Australian teams and the Kiwi teams second, was really quite tough for the Australian teams. That particularly like the Reds and the teams that weren't necessarily doing so well. That when you have the Kiwi teams sort of intermingled, like we're going to have in 2023. You can sort of get back up. If you lose one against the Kiwi teams, you've got an Australian team or you've got the Indrua coming up. So you can kind of get back up. But they said that they found it really difficult last year because they had, particularly this, I think the Reds were saying this in the season launch this year, that by that second or third game against the Kiwi teams, when you've got 5 in a row, it gets really, it doesn't look much brighter and you sort of get into a dark place when you just think week after week after week, you're playing Kiwi teams. So hopefully that can be something as Australian rugby fans we can look forward to in 2023, that we don't have to have this massive chunk of just Kiwi opposition consistently across, and we can sort of intermingle them throughout the season.
Yeah. Yep.
I think on that point,
and
yeah, Joey,
no, you go. Just go, Joey.
Sorry, it's well, I was just thinking on that point. I think that's where the draw last year sort of fell a bit in the Brumbies' favour because they had their bye at the end of in the middle of the season after they'd played all their Aussie games. So they sort of got to break their season into 2 bits. And I think if you sort of go back and look at the teams they're putting out against the Australian teams, they were doing a lot of resting and a lot of they were aiming for the back end of the season. They were like, no, that's the goal at the back end.
That's the hill we have to climb.
And so they came out of the gates in Super Round and it was like, we're going hard for it right now. Yep. Whereas the other teams, obviously, they had their buys at different spots, so they, hit their walls again at different times.
Yeah. Ando, we'll let you talk now.
Oh yeah, good. I'm here too. Hi. So what I was going to say is, in preparation for this, I was listening to the chat that I got to have with Laurie Fisher at the start of last season's competition. And one of the things that he was focusing on with bringing players like Jesse Mogg or Cam Clark or CFS back into the team, bringing some of them in was providing them with depth across multiple positions and wanting to make sure that they had players who were capable of stepping up into a starting Super Rugby team and being confident that every single one of them would be able to do what was required of them within a Brumbies setup in that position. And we saw particularly within the Crusaders match last year at the end of the season where you had a player like Rod Yona who was directly responsible for 2 tries within the first half that the Crusaders got. One with a charge down by Scott Barrett that fell into the Crusaders' hands. And then secondly with the Cody Taylor putting through a grubber in behind the line and Rod Yona just running past the ball and not even picking it up. I think he got a bit unlucky with the bounce, so I don't want to be too harsh. But either way, he made 2 mistakes that were directly responsible for 2 tries. And so Yona, whilst being kind of a good journeyman player, definitely wasn't of the same kind of ability, I would believe, as Debrasini, who's now kind of that second 10 at the Brumbies. And so it just looks like the Brumbies have been, as much as possible, trying to provide opportunity, trying to provide more depth so that if Noah goes down, they've got someone there. And they've got people that are competing for those starting spots. So Noah doesn't have a mortgage on 10 anymore at the Brumbies. Debrasini is good. And so him coming in is going to push Noah to better heights because he knows that he doesn't just have the right to the jersey anymore simply by being there.
There's a lot to talk around that, and I think we will get into that as we get through our squad in a little bit. But let's focus on some takeaways for the 2022 season. So, Joe, you're a loyal Brumbies fan. What were some of the key takeaways you had from last season?
I would say it was a great season. It was a good season. Good. You take a semi-final any day of the week at the beginning of the season, no matter how it ends. So
even if if you're within 2 points at the end of it, even better, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was the culmination of, I think that sort of core group that sort of came on, in 2020 that won Super Rugby AU, and then they sort of kept bringing in young guys again in 2021. They sort of just kept building, and that was and there was a bit of a culmination to that group, I suppose. And now they're in a position where they've just got to retool again because they've obviously lost, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it, they've lost a few players that were pretty important to their side. And so it's about retooling on that so they can just stay at that same consistent Brumbies level, because they should be playing semi-final football. Like, that should be the aim for the club each year. They have the talent still, regardless, even with those losses. So that should be the aim. It's just about finding replacements and bringing them on board seamlessly.
Well, that ties us perfectly into the signings and departures for 2023. Now, one name that I haven't chucked on there that I've just realised I probably should have started with in the signings column is Stephen Larkham. Is back for the Brumbies as head coach. And in the departure, we can then chalk in Dan McKellar as well. So let's talk a little bit about him first before we go through some of these players. What do you think? What's going to be different this time with Larkham? What's he going to bring to this Brumbies team that we may not have seen under Dan McKellar?
What I might just quickly say before I let Joe take over, because, I mean, he's more of a Brumbies fan, so might have some better insight than me. But I just remember I had a conversation, a bit of an argument with a Brumbies fan a few years back when Larkham was the coach, where I basically argued that the Brumbies under Larkham were a bit overrated and they weren't actually that good, because the performances that they put in under his reign, in my mind, weren't anything to be writing home about. And I'm not claiming that he's going to be the same now as he was then, because he's more experienced, had more opportunities around the world as a coach. But whilst we can sometimes get caught up in the legacy of how good he was as a player, I still would be hoping to see more from him as a coach than what we saw in his first stint for the Brumbies. So I might hand over to Joey now, but I thought I'd just put that out there as a thought or an idea.
Yeah, I don't know if overrated might not be the right word. I think they were a pretty dour team, and I think they just sort of at that point maybe played to their strengths. They had a pretty I don't know, they were pretty limited backline, I think, from memory, during those couple of years that he was there. Or particularly, well, maybe not. I can't. When was that? We're talking 2015, 2016.
17. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, right. So it's sort of like, there was like 14 he inherited a title content, like a grand final, or a team that made the grand final. And then he kicked on into the Wallabies not long after that. So I don't know. It's sort of, there was a few years there where they lost. Tamua left after the 2015 World Cup. White left after the 2015 World Cup. And so I think they were a bit limited in that sense. So I think they were quite boring. Like, they were very much, I think that's where the rolling ball reputation
came in.
Yep. Well, I think that's just where, like, that's all they do. Part of it came into it. I think he's got better cattle basically this time. I think he can, like, if they want to have a more expansive attacking game, they can, and they do. I mean, that's true now. They've already done that. They were doing that under McKellar, but they've just got that core DNA. I would hope that not a lot changes, actually, that he just puts his own maybe like flourishes on it here and there, and it's more around maybe development and long-term direction that he has a bigger say, because, I mean, if it's not broke, don't fix it, sort of thing. I don't think the staff around him is exactly the same, so I can't imagine too much is actually going to change.
One of the things that he has sort of said already in some of the launches and pre sort of Super Rugby chats is that Dan McKellar obviously had an emphasis on scoring points through the driving maul. And one of the things that he has come out and said is that we need to find other ways to score points. We can't rely on our maul every week. How does that sit with you, Joey? Like, is that something that you? I mean,
I think that's just a way of getting it over the line.
Don't fix it.
Yeah, it's sort of one of those things. Like, that's just how the Brumbies get it over the line, and they have variations off the maul that they use to score tries as well. It's just that it's a very effective platform for them to use once they get into that 22 zone. But outside of that, they play a pretty attacking brand of rugby when they're in that 40 to 40 zone and stuff like that. They kick a fair bit, but all good teams do. So I'm sure, like if you want to try and score more tries out on the wing, but I mean Tom Wright was the second highest try scorer last year. So I mean if your wingers scoring 9 tries in a season, obviously they're not just going for the maul all the time. So I mean maybe that's just reputation rather than reality. It's a bit of a
How many of those
stereotype.
were more tries though? I know
What,
that
Tom Wright?
he,
The Tom
for
Wright?
the
yeah,
wing.
he got 1 or 2 at least. Came in
No,
the
that
last
was
minute and took the ball.
nah. That was Noah.
That was Noah, yeah. I'll quickly jump in there. So I was just look. What I was saying before was a bit of a gut feel, and I went back and had a look at the actual like placings throughout the whole season during his reign, which is 2014 to 17 for Larkham, and it was 4th, 6th, 4th, and 4th. Now the win-loss ratios vary quite significantly during that. Like in 1 year where they finished 4th in 2017, they played 15, only won 6 games. They lost 9, but obviously went well within the finals to get to that point.
Also, probably more of a reflection of where Australian rugby was at that point.
Yeah,
exactly. But just one of the oh my god, I had a mental blank about what I was about to say. Oh yeah, in terms of the Brumbies being kind of forward focused or using kind of the line out of the maul as an attacking platform, the reality is that you have to be multifaceted in all attacking opportunities in the modern game. And so for a team like the Brumbies, sure, they've got a fantastic driving maul, and that's brilliant for them. But the amazing thing that you see about it, particularly that stat you made before in terms of backs getting tries and the like, is that the maul nowadays either results in a try directly from getting pushed over or provides a great platform for attacking play by drawing players in to defend that. So there's more space elsewhere in the field that the Brumbies are excellent at exploiting. So I think that a lot of the criticism that can be directed towards that sometimes dour style of play with the driving maul, from my mind, is actually a bit of jealousy. Like I'd love the Waratahs to have as strong of a maul as the Brumbies do. I would, because it means that we can be a multi-threat team. We're not just really strong backline plays off kind of scrum set piece. We're not just a good counter-attacking team, but actually we've got that upfront dominance as well. So yeah, there's a lot to be said about it. And I think sometimes people just go for the easy cop out of it's a bit boring. We'd love to see more kind of running rugby, but look, to be honest, I'd rather see winning rugby, and the Brumbies have been pretty good at that.
Cool. Let's push on. So some of the other signings we've had this year for the Brumbies: Declan Meredith, Charlie Cale, Harry Vella, Ben O'Donnell, Jack Debrasini, Corey Toole, and Tamati Tua. Joe, out of that list, who jumps out to you, or who are you most excited to see in a Brumbies jersey this year?
So probably the one who's probably going to be the most influential, I think, is probably going to be Tamati Tua, just because he's looking likely to be the inside centre for the Brumbies, so he's got to fill Iro Simone's shoes. And I don't think he needs to do exactly everything that he did. But he's just got to be a big body who runs hard and does his job, and I think he'll do a good job. From the bit that I saw in the trial game against the Tars in Griffith, he looked like rock solid, so that was a good sign for me. Big guy, good on the advantage line, that sort of stuff. So I think he's someone that stands out to me. Other than that, it's just cool. A lot of those guys are actually just academy guys being pushed up into the top squad, which is always exciting to see.
And who jumps out to you? What's a name that you're excited about for this year?
Oh, look, I've already mentioned Jack Debrasini, but Ben O'Donnell and Corey Toole coming across from the Sevens program will be pretty exciting. Corey Toole was originally 15s before going on to play with the Sevens. It's a bit of a development opportunity for him. And so I'll love to see, he looked pretty good against the Waratahs down at Griffith, bagged a couple of tries there. And I really hope that we see a bit more of him throughout the season, because he is electric in terms of his agility and pace.
And then in the departures list, we've got... sorry, Joe, do you have anything you wanted to say on that?
I just said he's just got pure gas.
Yeah.
He's lightning.
He's fast. In the departures, we've got Scotty Seo, Ira Simone, Tom Banks, Falau Fatanga'a, Rod Iona, Lockie Albert, and Cam Clark. Now, quite a fair bit of experience that is leaving the Brumbies in that list. If you had to isolate one of them as maybe being the most influential, who would it be, Ando?
All right. Simone, without a shadow of a doubt. Looking at his performances when I was going through some of the replays in preparation for this podcast, he was just everywhere in terms of the backline attack for the Brumbies. He was incredible. And good arguments can be made for Scotty Seo being quite important because of the pressure that puts upon James Slipper now as kind of the other established prop. But yeah, Ire Simone for me, he's not irreplaceable, but there's going to be a really, really significant gap that I don't think they're going to be able to fill this season.
Yeah, the player that jumps out for me is Tom Banks, and that's probably because at the moment the Brumbies don't have a like-for-like replacement, like an out-and-out fullback who's confident
Jesse
in
Mogg.
that position. Yeah, but Jesse Mogg's not the type
surely.
of player that you want to be like relying on to, like, what is Jesse Mogg now? 32?
Hey, that's still young, mate. That's still young.
But he's up there. They've got Jesse Mogg, but they've also got Tom Wright, who's going to be shifting across there. And we sort of saw for the Wallabies last year, he got a few minutes there at fullback, but he didn't really look like the finished product. And I think for me personally, he's the type of player I'd prefer to be seeing on the wing. He just looks more comfortable there, and a like-for-like replacement for Tom Banks, I personally don't think they've got one. Any thoughts on that, Joey?
On fullback?
On fullback or on departures?
Departures, I think Scotty Seo is going to be a big one, not only for the reasons Ando's outlined with just regards to the prop rotation, but he's also been there forever and a day. He'd probably be the most consistent member of that squad. So he was like, I can't remember when he made his debut, but it'd probably be around 2012, somewhere around there. And he's been there probably before that as part of the academy as well. So as someone who's been around the club, big personality, consistent in driving club standards and things like that. He's probably leaving. I imagine he's left a pretty big hole in the whole environment at the club. As for fullback, I mean, I'm kind of excited. I hope they go with Tom Wright. I think he's a really exciting option in that he's not a like-for-like replacement for Tom Banks. I think he can actually do more things than Tom Banks can. I think he can actually ball play more. He's got a passing game. So I think the ceiling for Tom Wright as a fullback is a lot higher than probably it was even for Banksy. He's just got to sort out his floor. So he's just got to play a bit smarter and cut out errors. But I think we saw signs of that last year. I mean, he's still got a bit of a brain explosion in him, but I think now he's getting quite experienced. You can see a lot of that's coming out. I mean, I just think back to that Ireland test where he was effectively playing fullback with Geordie Pataya and Marky Mark on the other wing, and it was like arguably one of the better back three performances we'd had all year. So, like, I think the potential's there. It's just maybe a bit of perseverance.
Yeah, nice. All right, let's move through to the squad for 2023. We'll start with the forwards. Anno, do you want to read this out for those that are playing along on the podcast?
Easy. Alan Alatoa, Fred Kahia, Sefo Kautai, Tom Ross, James Slipper, Harry Vella as the props. Hookers are Billy Pollard, Lockie Lonergan, and Connell McInerney. Locks, Nick Frost, Tom Hooper, Caden Neville, and Darcy Swain, although Tom Hooper's out for a few weeks now. What was Tom Hooper's injury? Can anybody remember?
I'd assume it's just coming back from the dislocated shoulder, isn't it?
I'm going to check.
I don't know. Otherwise,
Yeah,
I don't think he's played in any of the trials unless he re-injured something or injured something again. Yeah.
Back row is Jerome Brown, Charlie Cale, Ed Kennedy, Luke Reimer, Rory Scott, Pete Samu, and Rob Valentini. That's a killer back row combination right there. Some excellent players.
This really is a stacked forward pack, really, for the Brumbies this year. It's something that we've sort of come to expect of Brumbies rugby. Quite a few names that jump off the page there, but who are you most excited to see packed down for the forwards this year? Joey?
So as a former hooker, I'm pretty pumped to see Billy Pollard and Lockie Lonergan in action. They're really exciting prospects that I'm pretty pumped to see those guys. And then, Frosty. Nick Frost is, I think, a great option. I just want to see how he continues to develop after a big season for the Wallabies.
Fantastic.
I'm going to quickly jump in there. Tom Hooper.
Okay.
Tom Hooper did get an injury in the game against the Waratahs in Griffith, and it looked like a serious foot injury. And there hasn't been any further news about it, but it looked bad when he was taken off. So he might well be out for a while if it is as bad as first thought.
Right.
Okay. There you go. Let's get on that casualty ward then and figure out what's going on. Joey, do you want to run us through the backs for the Brumbies this year?
Yeah, sure. So at 9, they've got Nick White, Clayton Thorne, and Ando's favourite, Ryan Lonigan. At fly half,
you didn't have to. You could have left him off.
At fly half, they've got Noah Alessio, Nathan Carroll, and Jack Debrasini. Centres, Hudson Crichton, Chris Feo. Oh, I can never say his name properly. Yeah, that's it. Len Ikitau, Ollie Sapsford, and Tamati Tua. Outside backs, they've got Declan Meredith, Jesse Mogg, Andy Muirhead, Ben O'Donnell, Corey Toole, and Tom Wright.
Fantastic. Now, I think I know who Ando's going to say here, but let's see if he sort of bucks a trend. Who are you most excited to see play in the backs for the Brumbies this year, Ando?
Oh, look, most excited. I think I can't ever go past Ryan Lonigan, but I will for this moment. And I'm going to be saying it's going to be really interesting to see how the wing options stack up here for the Brumbies, because Andy Muirhead is perennially underrated by anybody who is not a Brumbies fan. He has been solid gold for them for a while now, but not in any kind of glitzy kind of glamour ways. So although he was well-deserved in Wallabies squad last year, he didn't actually get any game time for them. And it'll be interesting to see whether Ben O'Donnell and Corey Toole push their way in, and also what the outside backs are going to look like, whether Tom Wright does go back to 15 or whether they keep Muirhead and Wright on the wing and have Jesse Mogg start at 15 to try and not change things up a bit. It'll be interesting to find out whether or not Dave Rennie / Eddie Jones had much of a conversation being like, Tom Wright needs to be at 15. He needs a full season at 15, because it might well be that Wallabies push that makes the Brumbies coaches say, okay, cool, Wright is going to be our 15 for the season.
Any thoughts on that, Joey?
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. I would be interested to know if they have had that conversation. Yeah, back three plays pretty similar though too. So depending on how they want to use it, playing 15 and wings not too dissimilar. So maybe it's not like maybe the Brumbies just go, look, he's their best option for us, so we're going for it, or something like that. Deal with it. I don't know. As for players that I'm looking forward to seeing, I don't know. The backs are pretty locked in. I'm just curious to see that I think they are going to go with Tua at 12, like I said before, but that's probably the big sort of, I mean, talking about like-for-like replacements, that's the big one that they don't have a replacement for, like Ando was saying earlier. Like, that's where I think Simone Elliott is probably the biggest hole in the back line and harder to replace. So that's, I'm more interested to see just who fills that hole.
Just around the general kicking play, I know Tom Banks did a lot of the kicks to touch and stuff for the Brumbies and sort of general kicking. Who steps in and takes over for that, do you think? Does that shift Jesse Mogg more into consideration of needing a player, particularly in that back three, who is more comfortable kicking the ball?
Well, both the top nines are pretty comfortable leathering it, so I'm sure they can do it. Noah's not bad, and then they've got Debrasini as well. So, and he's probably a smoky for 15 if they want to go with two playmakers and a massive cannon at 15. He's played 15 before, so there's that option as well.
That's the name Debrasini. Just talk about him for a little bit. That's a really smart move, I think, by the Brumbies. It's something we spoke about last year, and we highlighted that depth below Noel Alessio they came undone, particularly late in the season when Rod Ayunas stepped up, and no disrespect to the guy, but probably didn't lead the team around as well, or didn't have the experience in the saddle to kind of slot in and be a like-for-like replacement for Noah. Debrasini comes in. He's played really well in the trials so far this year and last year. He looks like he's actually sort of screaming or knocking on that door to sort of unseat Noah from that starting position. So we already spoke previously around how that's going to just help Noah and sort of give him a bit more competition to make sure he is consistently improving to get that starting jersey. But just in terms of a replacement, if Noah were to get injured or to bring in someone to manage Noah's time throughout the season, having a player like Dabrazzini is a massive plus for the Brumbies.
Definitely. He's a great option. To have him sitting on the bench gives you a lot of safety feelings.
All right, let's keep going then, and we will go into our most valuable players. Now, I know, Joey, you've got a list of quite a few. We've got 4 up here. Who are you
Yeah,
out
23.
of these 4?
Yeah, 23.
Yeah, how many's in a Super Rugby squad? No, they were all on it.
Which of these, Joe, then,
one,
you think are the most important?
So for me, I think it's going to be James Slipper, just for the reasons that we sort of highlighted earlier around with the departure of Scott Seo. Last year, they'll have to they were able to really effectively manage their minutes. They could basically do, one would start and play 50 minutes, and the other would play 30 minutes off the bench, and then they'd swap the other way, and little things like that. So they were able to basically manage both their minutes really well. This year, obviously, with Scott leaving, there's probably an experience void between with Fred Kahea coming in. So that's just something that they'll have to manage. I mean, I'm pretty confident Fred's going to be able to step up. He's a good player, but it's just when the big games come along, I think James is going to be probably the most important one, because we just don't have the experienced backup there. Don't have Wallaby as the backup loose head prop this year.
And who's another player that jumps out at you in this list?
Look, I think we mentioned it just a moment ago. It has to be Tom Wright in terms of just the uncertainty around that 15 position and what the back 3 composition will be. His involvement, whether that be at, say, 14 or 15, is key. So whatever position he takes will be really important. I mean, you could easily argue Ikitau because of his importance within the backline structure, both
that was going to be my
for
one.
attack and defense. But yeah, look, you can argue a lot of these, but yeah, I think for me, Tom Wright, because I'm more interested in what happens in that back 3 composition.
Yeah, I'll go with Ikitau, and just purely for the fact that, losing Ira Simone this year, we've already seen that they're going to need to fill that other centre pairing without Ikitau there. And should the Brumbies lose Ikitau in some way to injury this season, it's going to be a big ask to have 2 inexperienced centres come in, and they rely so heavily on his sort of go forward. So he's one of the players really, like, when we look at the depth across the board for the Brumbies, they're pretty stacked in most positions apart from centre. And should they lose Len Ikitau to, hopefully not, touch wood, a lengthy injury in this season, that they're going to struggle, I think, in that area. Any thoughts? Keep going. Pete Samu.
Good shout. Keep going.
Anyone else? Keep going.
Nah.
Done. All right. Season predictions for the Brumbies.
All right, season predictions. In terms of their strengths, there's a whole bunch of continuity from last year's squad to this year. Yeah, they've had some outs, but they're not the central players that the team is built around that they kind of lost. Probably the biggest to Ira Simone and Scotty Seo. So those 2 going is pretty significant. But their pack is just excellent. So that's one of the really strong areas of this team is the quality, the experience, and the physicality that this forward pack has. Weaknesses, we're just not exactly sure what the new coach is going to bring, Stephen Larkham. Mm-hmm. He obviously has more experience now than when he left at the end of 2017, and so it'll be interesting to see what he brings and how much change there'll be within the attacking or defensive structures of the team. And also there is a bit of concern about depth in certain positions. You've got a lot of talent in areas like the back 3, but if 1 or 2 players go down throughout the course of a somewhat long season, then they could get pretty significantly exposed. So that'll be pretty concerning. But having said all that, this is still a very good Brumbies team, and so we have them placed as the top 4.
Joe, what do you think the Brumbies need to do differently in 2023 to go that extra step and make the grand final?
I think it's about stringing the games to within matches, playing for the full 80 minutes. Like I was sort of talking about with the Blues semi-final and stuff. It's that first half they got a bit loose, and it was the same against the Crusaders a couple of weeks beforehand, and they let them get out to a bit of a lead, and then when they started playing their style and asserting that on the game, they worked themselves back into the game and back into a position to win it. So I think it's just about putting that together against those top teams for 80 minutes. That's what they've got to have as their aim for this year, I think.
And I think building on that point as well, like what needs to be priority for the Brumbies this year is to finish in that top 4 to ensure they get that home quarter. And last year they were so close. Like if you remember, had they not lost to Moana Pacifica in, was it the last round of the season? They were going to play the Waratahs in a quarterfinal in Canberra. Like as
they had a home
fans,
quarterfinal. There was a home semi-final.
Oh, it was the home semi-final then.
Yeah, they missed out on. Yeah.
But exactly. That's right. They did have that.
Yeah,
Who did they play in the quarter again?
The Hurricanes.
The Canes. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, but they need to make sure that they're on the right side of the draw so that they can secure those home quarters and semis, because it only came down to that loss against Moana Pacifica that sort of ended up shifting the way that the draw ran for them in the finals. And look, say what you will about Canberra and getting the crowd behind it, but if they can get themselves into a home semi-final, there'll be support for them. People will travel down from Sydney, particularly if the Waratahs have bowed out by that point. So I think that's a big thing that the Brumbies need to be conscious of this year, is finishing in a way that's going to secure them as good a run as they can up into the final. Anything else, Ando, or you're falling asleep on us?
Mate, I'm bloody exhausted. I was at the beach earlier today. But with that being said, I am incredibly excited for this game on Friday night. So I actually don't know who's going to win between the Tars and the Brumbies. Like, it being played at the new stadium, Allianz, is fantastic. The crowd figures are looking really, really good. Joey's going to be there in attendance, so it'll be good to shake his hand after the game either way. Yep. But it's just really, really difficult to be able to pick. And I'm really nervous, and I haven't felt this way in a while, because as a Tars fan, I've got high hopes for what this season could be for us. But we're coming up against a really good Brumbies team. It's going to be a good game. I'm very excited for it. Just have no idea who's going to win.
That's right. Now, I guess another plug for our tipping comp. If you do want to get involved in that way, do join that. Sorry, and let put your tips in and tell us who you think's going to win. I guess another plug for the podcast moving forward. Next week will be the first reactionary pod for Super Rugby Round 1. So we're doing things a little bit different this year. We are the People's Podcast, so we want to hear from you. Keep an eye out on our socials. We will be putting out polls about which games you want us to talk about, who was their favorite player, that sort of thing. So a lot more interactivity, is that a word? Coming for the podcast this year. Do keep an eye on our socials for those things.
Is there going to be a live reaction pod from the pub afterwards?
There's definitely going to be a live reaction pod. I'm not too sure what the driving arrangements will be for you, Mitch. I'm probably going to be training it in, so I might well hit the pub afterwards. But it's going to be loose in terms of its enthusiasm or despair, depending upon the result. So it'll be a lot of fun. And yes, there will definitely be a live reaction pod straight after the game.
Yes.
That'll be something for Joey to listen to on his drive back to Canberra.
That's right.
Welcome.
All right. Thanks everyone for getting to this part of the pod.
And on that point, I'll just quickly jump in and say, if there is anybody who listens to the pod that is going to be there at the game, feel free to send us a message on social media. We might see if we can get there a bit early and grab a beer with a few people, either at the stadium or at a nearby pub beforehand. it'd be great to say g'day and just talk up rugby in Australia for 2023. It's been too long since Super Rugby was in our veins, so I'm glad that we have that hit back again. Cannot wait for Friday. And fellas, thanks for being here with us tonight.
Wouldn't miss it, mate.
Thank you for having me.
Miss it. Cool. Thanks, everyone. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks, guys. Bye.